Hi, folks. This is Mr. Thomas, your friendly neighborhood film instructor, and I'm making this video for Dmpt 2640 color correction. The reason why I'm making this video is because as of summer 2020, where we're teaching the classes all online, we're missing a lot of the interactivity, of course, that we would have if we were meeting on campus. I'm not right there in front of you, right there in front of the students when they're doing the work. If they have problems, I can't immediately respond to them because we're at a distance. People are doing their work, and I know I'm definitely putting out material at different times of the day and night, so nobody's schedule is syncing up. So I'm making this video in an effort to give a little bit more of a feel of interactivity with the instructor, between the instructor, me, and the students, so that you know that you have support here with me, and maybe I can answer some of your questions. And it tends to stick a little bit better in people's mind to the lessons that you teach them when you see and hear a person as they explain things. So this is gonna be episodic. So that means that I'm going to be making short videos over a certain period of time, covering separate topics. Now, these are not going to be extremely long videos. They're not going to be as long as a class. And I'll probably separate our topics into bite-sized chunks. So hopefully you're all doing well during this COVID quarantine duration that we're in. As you can see, I have my COVID quarantine hairstyle going on here. I'm thinking about letting it grow out. It's a different look for me. I haven't had this look for a minute, for at least since the early 2000s. So I'm thinking about letting that grow out. Things are going well with me here at home. My wife and my dogs are doing really well. Just trying to stay safe and stay healthy. And I hope you all are doing the same things wherever you are. So let's talk a little bit about Dmpt 2640 color correction. In Dmpt 2640 color correction, the main tool that we are going to be using, or the software application, is called Dmpt Resolve. Now, I'm pretty sure that you probably already downloaded it. Just to let you know a little bit about it, it is a full post-production, or as full as really can be possible, post-production application all in one program. So that means that you can edit just like you would with Adobe Premiere Pro. You can do audio effects. You can record audio. You can mix audio just like you would with Pro Tools or Adobe Audition. You can do digital compositing and do motion graphics work just like you would do with After Effects. You can do, of course, color correction just like you would do you do that in Adobe Premiere as well in their Lumetri panels. And so the whole idea is they want to make it so that DaVinci Resolve is a one-stop shop. So you can do anything as soon as that SD card or mag comes out of the camera. All you really have to do is just use one application, DaVinci Resolve. It's a one-stop shop. That's one thing that makes it unique. The second thing that makes it unique is that DaVinci Resolve, currently in version 16, is free. So that means you can go to blackmagic.com and you can download it for free. And it's not like a limited version. You don't get a watermark. You don't have any limitations whatsoever. Well, there are some limitations, but those are really, really higher end things that you can't do with the free version. But as far as if you're just basically shooting and you're editing and you're doing other post-production work like sound and motion effects, then you won't see much of a difference at all. You won't see any difference at all from any other program. There is a $300 version that you can buy that adds some higher end functionality like stereoscopic editing. Like, for example, if you're editing a movie in 3D, higher end stuff like that. But that's not really something you have to worry about 99.9% of the time. So the free version is great. Something else I wanted to mention to you is the perspective from which we're going to teach DaVinci Resolve. There are basically two types of people who do color correction and color grading. Okay, those are two different things. Okay, two types of people in the film industry. The first is the digital imaging technician. The digital imaging technician is a relatively new position on the film set. Technically, they are a member of the camera department, So basically, they answer to the director of photography most directly. Okay, but it's a new position because of the fact that in the day of digital media that we're in right now, not shooting as much film as we used to. We're shooting on magazines, SD cards, or hard drives. Okay, and so the idea is we need to have a way to dump all the footage, which is basically digital information these days, computer language, from these mags onto a hard drive and then copy the footage to several hard drives for the sake of security, so that if we happen to lose our footage from one hard drive, we have a whole bunch of backups. So that's one duty of a digital imaging technician, is to make copies of the footage that's shot on set. Because after I finish, well, it's a job I do sometimes, so after I finish downloading or dumping all the footage from the card or the mag, and I make copies of it, I wipe it. Or sometimes I'll get the camera department to wipe it, or the camera operator rather, or the assistant camera person to take the mag back or the SD card back to the camera and format it in the camera itself. That's what I like to do. But the idea is, after you do that, all the footage on there that was on the hard drive or the mag or the SD card, it's gone forever. Okay, so as you can see, being a digital imaging technician, you have to be a very responsible person. Now, it has a lot to do more with color correction, the job of the DIT, than duplication. You do that, but that's not the hardest part of the job. The most challenging part of the job is color correction. Now, there's a difference between color correction and color grading. The DIT does color correction work. Color correction is not really a creative endeavor. Basically, you want to restore the footage that they give you from the camera so it looks its best, meaning that the highlights in the image are bright and the shadows are dark, just as it was shot. Okay, you're making sure that it's a technically correct image. The reason why you have to do this, you may say, well, why don't they just shoot it technically correct in the first place? Well, the reason why they don't do that is because with the digital cameras, they work really well in low light. So in a dark room, a digital camera will do a great job. However, in bright light, they don't do as well. So as a result, what you're going to find out is that you lose highlight detail and you lose shadow detail, but not as much. For example, if you look at my head here, right here, right, that's the highlight from the light up there in the room. Okay, that means the light is leaving the light in the ceiling and directly hitting my head right here. It's the brightest spot of light from that source on my head. Okay, the brightest single source overall. So that's a highlight. Okay, a shadow is the place where the light does not hit at all or not directly. Like, say, for example, in my shirt, right underneath my collar here. Okay, that's the shadow part. Now, one thing about video cameras is that if you look in the highlight part of your subject, you're going to see that even though it's a bright orange specular highlight, as we call it, on my forehead, you can still see my skin texture underneath it. That's called highlight detail. Okay, highlight detail. Okay, sometimes they'll call it texture in the highlights. Same thing with the shadows. Underneath this collar here, if you look at it closely, you'll still see the color blue for my shirt, and you see some texture from my shirt in the shadows, ideally. So you still see shadow detail. With video cameras, if you're not extremely careful, it's very easy to blow out the highlights. That means make the highlights so bright that you don't see any detail in it, and make the shadows so dark that you're crushing the blacks, as we call it, and you don't see any detail in the shadows. Okay, so what we do is we shoot with the digital cameras. We shoot something called log encoded format. Basically, log encoded format basically means that we're going to set up our camera. We can either do it manually, or you can do it with basically a little app or program they give you with your camera sometimes. Basically, we want to make it so that the brightest parts of the image, the highlights, aren't so bright, and the shadows aren't so dark. Okay, so when you do that, that means that the image is going to look kind of milky and bland. It's going to lack contrast. It's going to lack contrast because, as you know, contrast is the difference between the darkest part of the image, let's say it's my hair, and the brightest part of the image, let's say it's a specular highlight right here. Okay, if there's a huge difference in brightness between this and this, then it is high contrast. If there's not a big difference between the highlights and the shadows, okay, then it's low contrast. Generally, people like high contrast images, but you want to be careful when you shoot on a set a high contrast image because of the fact that it's really easy to lose those details in the highlights. As I said, rarely are shadows a problem because, like I said, video cameras are really good in the shadows. But anyway, so they shoot log encoded. They shoot the highlights so they're not as bright. They shoot the shadows so they're not as dark. But it's not a real representation of what that image is going to ultimately look like. That's where the DIT comes in. In addition to dumping all the footage and backing it up in a whole bunch of different places, they also use DaVinci Resolve to restore the tonal range, we'll call it tonal range of the image. Tonal range is basically making the highlights as bright as they're supposed to be and the shadows as dark as they're supposed to be, and all the levels of brightness between the highlights and the shadows, make all the levels of brightness right where they're supposed to be, as if you were standing on the set looking at the person under the lights on the set, if a person is your subject. Okay, so that's what the DIT does. Many times the DP, director of photography, and the director will come over to the DIT to take a look at what they just shot to see how it's looking. Do they need to make any adjustments or changes or reshoot anything? Okay, DIT has a lot of jobs. DIT also is, like I said, is part of the camera department. So many times they'll advise the director of photography on what they might want to try to do to get a specific look that the DP or the director wants. Okay, the DIT is also a camera tech. So if the camera goes down on set, the DIT is a person who steps up and repairs the camera. Of course, the DIT is working with lots of computer hardware and software, so you have to be really great at working with computers and working with information and backing up and copying things and troubleshooting hardware and software when it goes down. The DIT is kind of like a jack of all trades because not only are they a member of the camera department, but after the DIT does the work that he does, he hands off that footage to the editor. Okay, the editor wants to be able to sit down and just start editing. Okay, and one of the ways that DIT can help the editor do that is to be kind of like an assistant editor. So that means in addition to backing up the footage and doing color correction work, okay, I'm also synchronizing your dailies. That means making sure that if we shoot double system, where I'm shooting the audio on a digital recorder and the video on a camera, marrying the video and the audio together so that when the mouth moves, the lip flap, the right words come out of the mouth at the right time and they're in sync. That's something else the DIT does on set, as well as media management. That means that we want to label all the clips according to the slate, put them in nicely labeled folders that are easy to find and easy to identify. Everything is nice and clean and neat. So when the editor sits down to start to edit this footage, the DIT has organized. The editor doesn't have to hunt for stuff. Doesn't say, okay, I got the picture, the image, the video, but where's the sound for it? It's not synced up. You want to make sure your editor doesn't have to do that. Okay? So the DIT is they say it's part of the camera department, but the DIT is really like the bridge between the production and post-production worlds. And you have to know both very well. Okay? So the second job that we would use DaVinci Resolve for would be the colorist. The colorist is a person who adjusts the brightness, also called luminance, and the chrominance, or the hue and saturation of the colors that you see, so that they are telling the story that the director or the colorist wants to tell. Okay. Now I say telling the story because of the fact that a colorist is a storyteller. Okay. They are doing color grading, not color correction, but color grading to tell a story. For example, if you have a scene in Texas in the middle of summer, you may want to have lots of tones of orange and yellow to communicate the fact that it's hot. Okay, maybe if you have a little kid who's the hero of the show and you want to make your audience feel like he's a good guy, you may want to use warmer tones, oranges and reds. Okay, maybe if it's the bad guy who's cold-hearted, you want to make sure that your images have the blues. They kind of jump out of the screen at you. It's not so much that the colorist is adding colors as much as the colorist is emphasizing colors. So the colorist is not the only person in charge of telling a story with color. The director and the director of photography, of course, the art department, that means wardrobe, hair, makeup, okay, set design. When they do these things on set, they have to make sure that the colors are there in the first place. Okay, so it's not like a colorist puts color in an image that's not there. Okay, they're just accentuating the color that's already there. Okay, that's what they're doing most of the time. But color correction, remember, is what the DIT does. That's making a technically pristine or really clean image. Not much creative work going on there. Color grading is what the colorist does after the editor is done editing. That's where we're telling a story with color, and those are creative decisions. Okay, so that's a difference between a DIT, digital imaging technician, color correction, and a colorist. Both of them are in unions, and big time Hollywood features. Both of them are in unions. Like I said, the DIT is part of the camera department, so the DIT is part of the IATSE local 600 union. That's the same union that is in charge of the camera operators, and the colorist is a member of the IATSE 700 local, or the local 700 IATSE union, which is the union that is in charge of post-production, the Motion Picture Editors Guild, or the editors and the colorists, they're in the same union. Basically, just in case you don't know, unions are basically there to make sure you're getting paid right, you're getting insurance, and you're getting your vacation days, and all the things that would need to be looked after for you as an employee. That's what a union does, that and a lot of other things. They kind of arbitrate or negotiate for, say, like better pay on your behalf. If somebody's trying to cheat you, like your production company's trying to cheat you out of money or whatever, many times you'll call in your union steward who'll come in and file a complaint, things like that. So each IATSE is basically it's like the International Alliance of Stage, Theater, International Alliance of Television, Stage, I can't remember what the E stands for, maybe entertainment, I don't remember, but it's just basically anybody in film, television, or theater. It's a series of locals. That's what the IATSE union is. Each local is like a different department for a different job. So the editors have a union, the camera operators have a union, the art directors, or better yet, the wardrobe department, the wardrobe costumer has a union, the makeup artist has a union, and so each department has a different union, and usually the unions are in communication with each other and stick up for each other. So if, like for example, you're in a writers union, the Writers Guild, and the writers are not getting paid enough because the cinematographers or the camera operators are in their union, what they'll do is that when the writers strike, so will the camera operators as well. So they kind of all stick together, all right? And that's so that you can pressure whoever's in charge to stick up for, or to pay the Writers Guild so the Writers Guild members correctly. So when it's your turn, if you're a camera operator and they shortchange you and you go on strike, the Writers Guild will go on strike as well, so that you kind of all stick together so you can get what you want. But in any case, I gave you a lot of extra information, but that's kind of stuff you need to know, because that's how mainstream Hollywood works. So that's all for my first episode. I know it was kind of lengthy, but that's it for episode 1, and I'm going to post this right now.